Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the tutorial session by Pratibha on scaling Django app with MySQL. Pratibha is a senior Python engineer of our company looking over the development and maintenance of backend, including RESTful APIs and creating internal Python packages. Now I'll hand over the floor to Pratibha.
Hi everyone, my name is Pratibha and welcome to my tutorial on scaling Django app with MySQL. I'm so glad that you guys have joined us because I wanted to share this new thing that I have learned in last year, how I can use MySQL without going into Postgres. I know that Postgres is great. Many people love using it. But according to me, everything have its own good side and bad side. And we should really look into what we need rather than what is the fancy thing the other option is providing. So just to be clear, this talk is not about MySQL versus Postgres. We will totally focus on how to use MySQL to support high availability. Now as we see that we have so many software engineers in our attendee list, what is so much good about being a software engineer? We love to code. We love to code things, but why? What makes it so interesting? Is it the syntax and semantics of the programming language? I don't think that is what we are looking forward to. I think what makes coding so interesting is the step before coding. It's designing that module. It gives us a sense of creating something out of just the building materials that we have. And that is what gives us an adrenaline rush when we code or when we solve the bug. Same thing. So, what I want to do in this talk is to tell you how MySQL was used in my organization previously instead of Postgres because we have both, just to be clear, but we use them separately for their respective features. And I also noticed during the same period that MySQL has been criticized for being hard to scale. And let's say sometimes it's true. But usually you can make SQL version of MySQL scale according to the right structure and if you implement it well. We can build a Django apps with MySQL and then grow very large while remaining fast, efficient, and economical. So today, let's take a step back from coding and go through the architectures that can help you in scaling your MySQL instance. So quickly, let's go through the outline of talk. We will see why we want to scale. Is it really cost effective? What are the options of scaling that MySQL provide? If we move further from MySQL, what are the settings in Django that we can do to make sure that we are achieving the same results? And how we can optimize the queries in Django so that the database operation is as optimal as possible, as least frequent as possible. And then we will conclude by looking at the project consideration and how we should choose if MySQL is right for us or not. Now let's say, why should we scale? It's the biggest question. Whenever you have, let's say, you have created an amazing project with Django and you have a single instance of MySQL database. Now you want everybody to use it because it's just awesome and easy to use, right? But with amazing projects come amazing loads of users. So you have a single instance of your MySQL database. Now, what you want to do is to support large number of new users that are joining and trying to use your projects, right? So as the website traffic increase, you will see that as the number of user increase, the data volume also increase. You have to store large and large volumes of data in your database to make sure that whatever user wants is there. Now you have sufficient number of users, and when user grows, you start noticing that the website is getting very slow the performance of your website has reduced. And along with that, sometimes when the user traffic is on its peak, you will see that the system availability has gone down. There will be outage, there will be lots of issues because of which you are not able to provide user the application for which you were so much enthusiastic about when you launched it. Now, it's too much to ask this thing for a single instance of SQL. It's true you can use single instance of instance of MySQL to support certain number of users only. But to support a production level, it needs companions. So why scale? In a nutshell, we scale for better user experience. In simple words, scaling is making your database handle more traffic or load for read and write queries. It helps you to make your life easier, and if you want to have less number of alerts of database going down, or you don't want to make database your bottleneck, you prefer scaling. Now, the main question that comes when we choose a module to design and we choose a database along with it, we see if it is cost effective or not. If we want to scale, how much are we going to pay for it? Of course, each new scaled instance is going to be an add-on cost, and we want to make sure that it is within our budget. So like I said, of course, all these benefits of scaling a database comes at a cost. Some of the cost can be considered under few categories. First is cost of hardware. So it goes without saying that upgrading existing server or adding a new server into the database pool will incur hardware or hosting cost if you're going for hosting at other points. Then deployment effort, of course, whether it's time spent by the in-house developers or you have already a DBA team or the cost of external contractors, you have to consider the cost of installing and configuring the hardware, software, or the network. So in some cases, application code also need to change. So yes, that is a big point that is considered when we are calculating the cost. And maintenance. When systems become more complex, the maintenance costs grow. There are many areas where the maintenance costs go: documentation, training, the backups you're going to take for users, implementing and deploying the application enhancements to support it hands-on and henceforth. So in that case, we want to consider that if scaling is good, yes, we should, because it is part and parcel of the package. So what are the options we have if we want to go for scaling? We want to scale the database, but how should we scale? There are so many methods, but we can categorize them into two parts: vertical scaling, and we have horizontal scaling. So scaling vertically generally describes adding capacity to the existing database instance without increasing number of servers and database instances. Now, on the other hand, scaling horizontally means referring to the alternate approach of adding more instances of database rather than expanding a single one. So let's see how vertical scaling can help us. When we scale vertically, there are a few things which we have to consider. First, we have to increase the CPU and RAM. This is the easiest way of expanding your database. You have a single instance of database, you see your website is getting slow, you increase the hardware configuration of database so that it becomes more robust. Now, when you add CPU and RAM to an existing machine only, there are a few good things which will happen. One is less power consumption because it's the same machine. The cooling cost will go down because it's the same machine. And licensing, because you're not going to have more instances of SQL. But at the same time, there are problems which you will face if you go with increasing the RAM and CPU vertically. First is it's way more costly. Increasing RAM, fine, but increasing CPU is a very costly thing. Let me give you an example of AWS. If you create a machine, you will notice that adding more RAM will not add more dollars in your bill, but as soon as you add two more CPUs in your VM, the cost increased by 1.5 times because CPUs are more costly than RAM. Then there is always a limitation beyond which you cannot increase the capacity of a machine, because that's the highest that motherboard will provide or support. And if you have a vertically expanded database, then the risk of losing that will be more, because if the hardware failure is there, there are chances that the database outage will happen, and hence there will be a production outage. So we saw that good points are there and bad points are there, but you have to weigh it according to your usage. So why scale vertically? Because it is easiest thing to do. If you're going to increase it very infinitely small over the period of time, you should consider expanding vertically, because you just have to increase the CPU and RAM, and then from there your website will be stable. But then you have to think that how long this traffic flow will be stable. Will it going to increase or decrease? All those things you have to consider. We'll go through those at the end of the presentation. Now, the other option that we have, other than scaling vertically, is scaling horizontally. Now, when you talk about scaling horizontally, it means that we add more system of smaller configuration in terms of CPU, RAM, and storage. That means you have a 2-core machine with 8 GB of RAM and 50 GB of hard disk. And as soon as it started getting, if the usage of that machine goes beyond 70%, you can create another machine and link it so that both of them can work together to provide you to give you a sense of single node of database. But end of the day, it is small instances with lower configuration, but which can be scaled as and when required. Now, when there is a project with requirement of high availability or failover, adding additional server is the right option. It is always better to go with adding new servers than giving it to a single instance. So the benefits is it is much cheaper than scaling vertically, because you are going to scale it by adding new instances which are of less configuration and easy to run fault tolerance. If one node goes down, you always have a pool of nodes that will support the traffic on that one node. It is easy to upgrade. Once you have new instance, you can just add it into the pool, add it into your config file, move on. Problem? Bigger footprints on data center. If you keep adding new instances, there will be a chance that all of your data center is flooded with new but small instances of database. Utility cost will go higher, definitely. And more licensing fees, because if you're using the paid database, each instance is going to have its own license. So you have to think it through, what do you want to do? But as we said, that it is a better option than going through vertical if you want to have high availability. So let's see, you have a single instance of database. Now you want to scale horizontally. What are the architectures that supports that? First, our old favorite active passive. I think this is the first setup that everybody go for when they move from single instance to load balancer, so that one node is active and other node is on the failover. Both have replication enabled. If the active node goes down for any reason, the node 2, which is passive, will get on and save the save the web traffic. So in the nutshell, we have two database instances, active and passive. All the read write will happen on the active node, and the write operations are replicated to the passive node as well to keep in sync. And in the event of failure of the active instance, query and update traffic is redirected to the passive instance. So as we see that this is highly expected setup in most of the organization who are moving from single instance to the next instance. Now we see what it does. It does improve availability and failover, no doubt in that, because it supports more instances. But it doesn't improve the capacity of performance, because at one time there is only one single instance which will be providing or which will be serving the read and write operations. So although it is good, it has failover, it supports availability, but still the capacity has not increased. Now to increase that, we will look into master slave options. What it do, that web server is there, and then you have a set of servers at the database side. One of them will be master, and it can have more than one slaves. Read and all the write operations will happen only in master, whereas all the read operations can be happen in parallel from your slave machines. So what is the benefit it is providing? You will see that at a time you can write to one node, but the read operation can happen from three machines. So the load of read database calls has equally distributed. Instead of one single node, it can be distributed among three. So instead of our habit of creating a master slave architecture and routing all the write queries on master instance and read queries from master instance, we will redirect our all read queries to the slave instance, which are replicated from the masters. So at a time, we can have multiple slaves running at one and scale our read operations horizontally. But what we can do in this case, we can scale the master vertically. So you see, we can fuse at that point so that master have the highest configuration so that it can support read and write both, and slaves can be of lower configuration because they provide only the read operations. So this kind of mitigate the issue of active passive nodes. But there's a problem with master slave approach. Every record that is inserted in my SQL table have one primary key to index the records for faster select or read operations. Generally, we have the primary key on the table and have multiple masters this key. And when the table get replicated to different slaves, this master key get replicated, or this index get replicated to all the slaves. But if there is any issue in that replication, the data become redundant to use. Sometimes it can lead to duplicate ID. Sometimes it can lead to having an ID which exists in index but doesn't exist in real. So that is the issue which is highlighted in master slave, and there are options or these solutions which are provided for mitigating this issue. So if you see at the master slave, One master, unlimited slave, unlimited machines from which you can do the read operations. Great for application which have more read operations. That means if you have any requirement where the write is very less, but the read is a lot. For example, you have a news website or you have a blog website where the write will be very less. If it's a news, it's once a day. If it's a blog, maybe once a week. But the read operations are many, so you have unlimited slaves. Read operations will be served instantly. So it is good for addressing I/O bottlenecks, obviously, the networks and the disk. You have unlimited slave. It helps a lot when such issues can be mitigated. Also, it is good for geographic dispersion. So let's say that you have clients which are at different locations, and you have clients which write a lot at a certain location. So you can have slaves at different locations where you have high frequency of users, so that the database is closer to the user and network of internet, and the read queries will be acknowledged at that instant instead of coming to your region. So it helps a lot in high availability and performance of your website. Along with that, it requires application logic to separate read and write operations. Now, this is, you can consider as cons, because you have to make sure that you are reading from one database and writing from the slaves. So what happens that in Django, as you know, that you have the options to separate these 2 points where you are reading or the database where you are writing. So you can use the roots in Django. So you have to apply that particular logic to make sure that you are reading from the database you are supposed to read and writing where it is supposed to be written. Along with that, replication is asynchronous. So there are chances that as soon as you have written here and you are trying to read consecutively, subsequently, maybe it is not replicated yet. So that's a big problem in master slave. You have to make sure that if you are writing, you may have to wait for replication or synchronization to happen so that when you read, you are getting the correct data. But if your data doesn't change too much, of course, this is a very less issue for us. Then master instance can be scaled vertically. I think it can be considered as a good point, but again, for some instances, it can be a bad point, because if every master have a certain limitation of hardware, and if you cannot scale it beyond that, and every master have to support all the slaves. So if it cannot support that much replication, then it can again make your database as a bottleneck for your website performance. So next option that we have is creating a cluster. I think this is the far most valid approach, which is not valid, I should say. This is the far more acceptable or preferred approach in production. When we have a database, everybody wants to create a cluster of it so that all the read and write, all those routing will happen inside the cluster itself, so that you don't have to take care of replication logic, and you don't have to take care about the confusion if you're reading at the right time or writing at the right time. In the cluster, what it does is that cluster distribute query processing and data storage across multiple nodes. So there is no single point of failure. And it also allows unlimited scaling, because you can have small nodes which will serve as the DB nodes. Now, there are 3 layers. You have storage nodes, you have SQL nodes, which takes care of query processing, And then you have the management nodes. Usually people prefer to have clusters, as I said, and all the data in these clusters are in synchronization. So what happens is that whenever there is a write query to any one of them, it is replicated instantly to the other node. So the subsequent read operation will always have correct data. And management node takes care of all this thing. So which is a good, right? We don't have to go and write special queries. We will just have one URL of cluster, and cluster takes care of all the routing of read and write queries. That's what we want to achieve. So in cluster, good solution. I think the best solution for high availability. We want to have high availability. We don't want to make go through the headache of routing the queries. Cluster is your option. Then the in-memory storage provide high performance. That goes without saying. If you have anything in in-memory, either it's a cluster, database, it provides high performance. Of course, scaling can be done very easily because all you have to do is create a single node, add it into pool, create a single node, add it into pool, and heavy write operations can be executed or can be performed parallelly on the nodes, and replication will happen almost instantly. That's what we need. And it is also possible to scale specific portion of the cluster so that if there is a bottleneck in those portions, you can increase the CPU and RAM. But it is always advisable that you should have all the machines in your pool at the same configuration, because that's how you're going to make sure that they are performing equally. Well, it doesn't happen in real time in production. There are always machines which perform better than the other, although they have same configuration. Synchronous replication between nodes make cluster inappropriate for geographic dispersion. Yes, because all the nodes in a cluster should lie in the same geographical area, best in the same data center. So if you want to have a geographically dispersed setting, either master slave, or you can have small clusters at different points, and maybe you can have a master slave cluster which will work as which will have a replication in their own. So yeah, it's always permutation and combination of this technology can ensure, using which you can ensure high availability and performance of your website. But of course, you have to consider many things when you decide a particular strategy. Now, if you want to host a storage area network, cluster is not a good option because of the obvious reason, because you need a storage which will be can be used for hosting other things. Now, the storage node needs lots of RAM because it has to provide in-memory storage as well. So yes, that is a cost which you have to consider when you're going for the cluster environment. Complex? Yes. Deploying it, maintaining it, it is complex because clusters are more, they are supposed to be more self-existing entity. So you have to make sure that you have done all the settings correctly to make it function as you expect it to do. Next is shrouding. So shrouding, what basically it means is that you have a data and you want to provide it if you have a data, and if you have a data, let's say you have a table which have multiple columns. So what you do in the most basic sense, if you implement shrouding, you break up the large table into small chunks, and each chunk will reside in the different database. So shrouding basically means is breaking up large database into many smaller databases. It can be carving of the table or cutting the table vertically, Like in the example, you see that we have the original table, which is customer ID, and it has first name, it has last name, and its favorite color. In vertical partitioning, we can split this table into two, preserving the primary key, which is customer ID, so that we know when we are associating the data. And we have two virtual points, and we save both the tables VP1 and VP2 in them. So this is vertical partitioning of table. This data is still there, but you are saving the data into two different nodes. And there is another form of partitioning. One is horizontal partitioning. So you divide the large table by rows. And this will ensure that the data of each primary key exists in the same database table, but the chances are that the same table in the other node will not have same data. It is generally used only by the most demanding applications when you have large number of rows. At that time you want to, and there are read heavy, at that time you make sure that your data is split between different shards, and whenever you want to read some data, you know where it is indexed, and you point your query over SQL, point your query over there and read it from there. Personally, I recommend considering sharding only as the last scaling strategy, because it can be a bit complex to implement. When it comes to sharding, you have to be very careful when you are dividing your rows vertically and horizontally, because if data is lost, there are chances that it can lead to unexpected user experience, and your user may complain back saying that this is not what they were looking for. So before going down to the path, I would consider any and all of the scaling strategies which I have discussed just now. Sharding look really like a best option, but if this is the best option for you, you should really check out the online resources, because there are several sharding solutions for MySQL, and you should not roll out your own. You should use which is already accepted industry standard sharding solution. So if you want to go with sharding, that's what you need to do. So why should we go for sharding? Good strategy for handling extreme database loads, because you have data distributed among different virtual points. You know, when you want to read a certain data only, you will not go through the whole row. It is the most appropriate when load is accessing a few table and join operation happens between the shards is not required. Success depends largely on sharding strategy and shard size. This is true. If you just keep on, let's say you have 4 columns and you just split all of them into 4 virtual points, it will create unnecessary read operations between shards, or it can create unnecessary loads on the server because you want to create the whole row. So you have to be very specific, very clear about the sharding strategy you want to use. It may require periodic resizing of the shards, because there will be data which is no longer required. So you have to maybe truncate or get rid of that data. Complexity is high in terms of deployment, maintenance, and logic wise. So like I said, leave it as the last option. Of course, it provides availability, and impact of shard failure is very small, because you will lose only a portion of data, not the whole data. But if you use it with another strategies, let's say that you have active passive and you use sharding with it, it will be much better, because high availability also will be ensured, and sharding will ensure that there is no impact of hardware failure or the database failure at a particular point. So these are the sharding strategies so far. So these are the ways using which you can do horizontal scaling. Now, we have seen why we do vertical scaling and how we can scale horizontally. So when you scale horizontally, you can have different kinds of infrastructure points where you can scale either as in maybe you will have an active passive, and then you have a cluster which are in active passive. Maybe you will have a cluster which is in master slave, or you can have active active. So you increase your database nodes as and when required, and you can have heterogeneous scaling system, heterogeneous scale system in terms of database. So that's all for scaling options in MySQL. Now I want to talk about using MySQL with Django. So all of us love Django. Okay, almost all of us love Django. So there is no midway, like I like Django. Either you love Django or you don't. So in the latter case, you love Flask, I would say. So there are always a question, should we go with MySQL or not? Should we go with Postgres, or should I just rely on SQLite, the sweet old which gets done things easily? So Django is famously known as the web framework for perfectionists with deadline. It's the slogan by which they live by. And MySQL is world's most popular open source database. If you want to use both of them together, you have to make sure that you are not creating some conflicting settings. Your queries are optimized. You are making sense of all the points in your infrastructure. So let's see how we can do that. I'm not going to show you how to deploy it, but I'm going to discuss with you guys how and what things we should take care when using Django and MySQL together. First thing, make sure you are scaling at each point in your infrastructure. So it's not like that you are using MySQL with cluster. Great, it will provide you high read and write operations without any issue. Then you have Django running as a single server. That will defeat the purpose. Your website will not be fast if you your website will not be fast if you work with a single instance of Django server. So what you have to do is that we have discussed how we can scale database. Let's just say that you have cluster at the lowest base. Then for Django, make sure you use gunicorn. It's a very good utility. You can start many instances of Django server using it, and each of them serve your request. So at a time, let's say you have started 5 workers of your Django, you can serve 5 requests parallelly. Instead of 1 request parallelly, when you run it using production server, that is run server option of manage.py. So you have Django, you have database, very good. But having gunicorn in place doesn't ensure load balancing. What you need before that is Nginx. I think Nginx is widely chosen option for web server. It makes sure that your requests are coming right. It makes sure that all the certificates in place. It makes sure that all the balancing, all the requests that are coming are landing to this correct instance of worker, all those things. So it's a very pretty fancy, and I love it, to be honest. I love it more than I like Apache. Then before that, load balancer, many people use as HA proxy for load balancer. It has its own benefits. I personally use Nginx for load balancing as well. So you can merge both of them. But yes, HA proxy have its own benefits. You should really look into it if you have loads which cannot be handled by Nginx. And of course, caching. Django and having Django and MySQL is good, but if your data is going to be very static, go for caching. Redis, Memcache are there for your use. You should really look into them. So scaling and making sure that each point of your infrastructure is contributing into making your website perform fast and making sure that all the users are getting correct result within the time bound is our target, is the thing that we should do. And this is what we are experiencing. So in the end, we are here to improve user experience, and all these things in infrastructure contribute to that. Let's start with Django database setting. So whenever you go with the database block in the settings.py, this is what you see. Engine, name, user, password, host, ports. This is the standard default things which we have to put into database setting to connect to any database. But here we are going to discuss what more things we can add into these settings to make its connectivity with MySQL more persistent, more it should take less response time. End of the day, that's our whole point of view when we want to do these settings. So let's see, all the settings in red are the additional settings that we are supposed to do. First is connection max age. Now, persistent connection to database, avoid the overhead of reestablishing a connection to the database in each request. So this particular flag, connect con max age, make sure that what will be the lifetime of your each connection to the database. If it is 0, that means for every new request, you are going to create a new database connection, serve that request, get the data, and move on. Next request, connect again, get the data, move on. Now, to enable persistent connection, we have to provide an integer number here, which is number of seconds, which is of the lifetime of the database connection. So, but here I have set it to none. That means you connected once and that's it. You serve all the queries through that one connection. It's good. Some points you can add the lifetime to it. In production, I set it to 15 minutes in seconds, of course, so that every 15 minutes it has to open new connection. But most of the time I've seen that it is set to none when the operations are write heavy. It will ensure you that suppose in Gunicorn you have run 5 workers of Django. So each one will open 5 connections to database and reuse same connection for all the requests that are coming. Next is the option block. In this, we can initiate the things which are, so whatever is inside the option blocks, you can set directly into database as well. You can go to database, go to the command prompt, type all those things, or you can make it default into your settings.py. So first, init command is the property which takes care of running them, to be sure. So first is having our storage engine as InnoDB. This is usually the point where we mention what is the storage DB going to be. So we mention usually the InnoDB. Then you have to make sure the character set connection is correct. So we mentioned that here as well. Then there is something which is set here, which we set here, but I've not added it because it is very I should say selective, is setting the SQL mode. So the default mode is the strict trans table. That means that whenever there is a warning, it get escalated into errors, especially in the case of database truncation on when something new get inserted. So if you want to activate the strict mode, you have to add that here in the init command as a SQL mode key. Second, the last one, which is session transaction isolation level. So what is the isolation level is, let me explain. Let's say when you have running concurrent loads and different transaction of different sessions may interact with each other. Now, it can affect, so if you don't want that, you can set that using the transactions isolation level. You can set a connections isolation with the isolation level entry here, and it will make sure that your connection or your request is not talking to each other, your session to the database is not talking to each other. What it will make is that suppose two sessions are reading the same data from the database, so maybe database say that, okay, both of you need same data, I will read it once, give it to you both. You can avoid that by setting it here. Or maybe, so here are 4 settings which can be done: read uncommitted, read committed, repeatable read, and serializable. If it is set to none, or if not set it, it will be default to whatever the server's isolation level is. In case of read operations which are very frequent, what happened that sometimes you have to be very sure that the data that you are reading is correct. Let me tell you one case where I had to change this particular setting. I was having a socket server running, which is reading the data from the table every 5 seconds. And there was another entity, let's say a Celery, which was writing into the database. The writing is not that frequent, but the reading was very frequent. So at one point, what was happening that although the data in the database getting modified, here it is not reading the new values from database. So I have to check the isolation level in database and modify that. So it was repeatable read. That means if the same data is getting repeatedly read, it caches it. And that for that kind of the purpose of having the socket server that I was using. So I have to change the isolation level for read committed so that whenever there is a commit, the cache property will get expired, invalid, and the new read should happen from the database. So that setting can be default here, or if you are using it directly into the Python script, you have to modify this into your database using CLI, of course. Next one, Django query optimization. This is something which we all look forward to, because it doesn't matter how many clusters we deploy, how much we create so many web servers, so many workers using JUnit, if our queries are not optimized, we will still run into performance issue. So first thing first, don't retrieve the things you don't need. Means that if you just want to retrieve the data just to make sure that that data is there, so better than that, use exist. Means if you are retrieving a row using a filter just to check that it is there or not, it is better to use that exist feature function instead of filter function, so that it will tell you that yes, it exists, but I'm not reading it from database. Let me tell you one comparison of runtime. So suppose I have to count the number of users in database. If I use count function in the model, it takes less than a second. But if I fetch all the rows, which will be in a list, and then I try to get the length of that list using the length function of Python, it takes 8 seconds. This is a huge difference. And this is just happening when you have somewhere around 94,000 rows. Sometimes you deal with data which are much more than that. In my case, I deal with data, and the data are 500K or 600K rows in the database, which we have to read to get the things done. So there's always better to use an inbuilt function than getting all the data and then kind of making your own simulated function for that. Second, you can directly use the foreign key value. This is something which I realized very recently. I wanted to add this here. Many times what happened that we just want to show what is the ID of that foreign key. So instead of going into that table and then getting the foreign key, that is the ID, you can directly use the ID underscore ID. So let me give you an example. Suppose you have an entry which has a foreign key to the table, which is blog. And that blog have an ID. The blog entry have an ID. And you just want that ID. So instead of calling entry.blog.id, that means going inside the blog table and getting that ID, you can directly use blog.id, blog underscore ID, and it will provide you that value exactly the same without any additional query. This is really very important because many people do database work after fetching the rows. Suppose you have a device table, you have groups table. You want to check which devices lies in the particular group. So what people will do, people will first fetch the group, its details, then use its ID to filter there. Don't do that. It is just an additional query, and we don't want to do additional database call. So it's better use aggregation, like you can do the joint instead of going from first getting the foreign key, then using that foreign key to get the data from here. There is a way using which you just go through the actual table and use the foreign key to check if it is that value or not. That will be much faster. Or you can perform the joins inside the query itself instead of going through fetching all the rows from the tables and then performing the join. Excludes are very helpful. There are always rows in database. There are always columns in rows which you don't want. Like in my case, I always keep columns like created at, modified at, deleted or not, just for safety purpose. So all these are timestamps and booleans. I don't want it when I'm actually showing this data to the user. In that case, you can use exclude to remove those columns when you're fetching the data from the database. So in a nutshell, the things that you can do as a raw SQL query, do it in the database itself using Django ORM. You don't need them, don't fetch them. Fetch only what you need. That is the baseline of optimizing queries in Django. Now, if you want only the individual objects, it will be great if you index them. Always have unique indexes that can decrease the time it takes to fetch a particular set of objects or the particular set of rows. It decreases your query response time. It decreases your overhead, the database. It's a win-win situation. Now, there are situations when you really need to go through the different hops of foreign keys. In that case, instead of So what will happen that suppose you have two tables. In my case, I have a table of, let's say, timestamps when this particular device was last connected. Then I have a device table. Both of them are in different tables because of additional rows that I'm maintaining for them. So this device table key is the primary key in the timestamp table, because of which whenever I want to fetch the timestamp of devices of a particular group, every time I have to gather that device name as well. In that case, what will happen that I will first get the rows of a particular group. For each row, I will go to the device name and get its device table and get its device name. It will always be an additional overhead to do things like this. This is the standard approach which people use, but I will seriously suggest that you should use select related. When you use select related, what will happen that when you are fetching the data of these rows, timestamp table rows, all the related data will be also go with them already. That means you are not making second query to the database to get the device names. So select related, prefetch related, also same. So you should really look into it, and it really decrease a lot of time. I had 300k rows in my database, and to read all of them and have a device name of all of them, it took me 8 seconds at max. So select related is really helpful. This is from my personal experience. Now every model have an ordering of it. Usually it's the primary key. If you don't care about it, don't take it, because when the data is written, it is properly ordered from database. Don't use it if you don't need it. You can, what to avoid getting the data into the particular order, you can send order by with no parameter in the query set, and it will, you should see a great improvement in turnaround time, because ordering a large number of rows into memory takes really long time. This is something which is very good if you have lots of read operation. So caching is obviously goes without saying. Caching is always a favorite way of developer to make sure that data is already there without going into database. So it is the best method to reduce DB hits as much as possible. So here, let's take an example. If you know that for a particular model instance, some property won't change, you can cache this result instead of calculating it again and again. So let's say that you have a page where you are displaying first name and last name of the user. Instead of calling the first name and last name again and again, you can cache this, and it will not be calculated again and again, as it says. So it is always good to cache. Then, of course, query caching. Everybody wants to cache its queries. Many times we query same data again and again from database, and if data is not changing rapidly, it makes sense to cache those query sets so that whenever we call it again, it can be read from cache instead of your database. How it is done? It is usually key pair value. It generates a hash of query and it maps it to the cache results. So it helps ORM in getting the data faster because it doesn't go to the database actually. Then my favorite caching endpoint is Memcache. Let me just say that. And then caching machine is also helpful in some points. You should really use it. Then template caching. Suppose you have web pages whose content won't change for a longer period of time. So it makes sense to cache the parts of those pages so that like navigation bar of the website or the sub-menu page of that website, or because these are not going to change. So for example, in the news websites, the previous day's news, it is not going to change. So just cache it. and read it. If you want to make sure that it is not obsolete, you can put a timeout in this cache so that after a certain amount of time, that entry get invalid and you will read from database again and cache it again. It certainly reduces your DB hits. Then asynchronous code. Yeah, this is one of my favorite because there are points, there are things which we do in asynchronously, and there are API calls which have to respond in particular definite time, which are synchronous. And sometimes they collide, they kind of create lots of problem. So what I do for all the asynchronous code, like sending email, feeding large data into database, I use RabbitMQ and Celery. I totally recommend them to you. They are great great tools to make sure that your asynchronous code is not blocking your synchronous code. In conclusion, this is the biggest question many people have is MySQL really the best database for Django? So no, there is no right or wrong database. It purely depends upon your requirement. If your usage is, if your usage can be satisfied by the MySQL, go for it. But if you say that is Postgres is not great, it is. It has its own good things, like it has PG notify. If you are using MQTT, you can send the notification from database itself. It has triggers, which are easy to implement and use. If your data don't use triggers, MySQL is a good choice. So there is always good and bad in both of them. Postgres, a bit complex to implement compared to MySQL. So whenever you design, whenever you want to scale, make sure you know what you're doing, and you should know what your project will be in coming 5 to 10 years. So what things you should notice when you're doing that? What will be your database load? Whenever you are designing your module with Django and trying to choose the correct database, these are the things you should consider. In fact, you should consider these points when you are deciding the infrastructure. At each point, you should ask this question: what is your load? What is the requirement of availability? Is it okay to have a downtime? Is it okay to have a maintenance window or not? Is it okay to have a slow responding website? Because there are some data which has to be which are archived, and if you have to retrieve that, it is definitely going to impact your performance, the turnaround time. So is it okay to have the a bit low performance or not? Then what is the requirement of failover and recoverability? How fast you are supposed to recover? If your client wants to have failover or not, if you are going to provide failover, how you are going to provide it. Then how much is the read and write operation? Is it a read heavy? Is it a write heavy? Is it a combination? You have to consider this. What are the how geographically dispersed your users are? Are they centric? Are they dispersed across the globe? You have to consider that again, because based on that, you have to decide, is your database going to be centralized? Is database going to be replicated? Your web server is going to be local. Your web server is going to be geographically located, all these things. Then does database create higher than normal processing load? Is it doing some calculation? Does it have some stored procedures which are very heavy? Is it very is your application very heavy when it comes to writing data into database or performing some calculations into database? Then if you are going to upgrade from the existing system to the HAS system, then what is the utilization of your existing hardware? How much you were spending, or what was your total RAM usage, CPU usage? Was it a bottleneck? Where was the bottleneck? Is it in database? Is it a particular table? Is it based on your read application? You want to read more, but you cannot. All these things you are supposed to consider. So These are, like I said, all these things you have to consider before actually deciding. And before, these are the things which will be decided and implemented and jotted out before you actually start coding. So I would suggest to consider this checklist. And next time when you deploy or implement something, make sure you have clear visibility on each of these points. So as we have reached to the end of my talk, these are the very useful links for me. Like this last link is very useful when you want to see how is the performance getting optimized in Django. Or this one, growing up with MySQL, it's a real-time story of a team who evolved with MySQL, who used MySQL, then they face problem, and how they evolved with it. Then there is the second link. It gives you the tools based on which you can check the performance metric of your MySQL. Or when Cura implemented MySQL sharding, how did they do it? All these links, the first one, it's a comparison between Postgres and MySQL. It is a bit partial because the person used Postgres, but again, it has given the good points of MySQL as well. You should definitely go through them. Very useful links. With this, my talk has ended. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please leave in the chat. What about performance UVCon versus GUnicorn? Yes, but question is that do you want to use UVCon or GUnicorn, which is you are more comfortable with, which is more reliable? So these are not the things which you can decide just looking at the pages or just looking at the graph generated by the people. You can use them as a reference, but it is always suggested to have a small POC and do the stress testing and see if UVCon is more useful to you than GUnicorn, or GUnicorn is more useful than UVCon. I hope that answered your question. So my Twitter handler, my email are both same. My first name, last name combined. Same Twitter handler, same LinkedIn, same Gmail. So you can use it to contact me anytime if you need any help, any clarification, either this talk, anything related to GUnicorn, MySQL, Postgres, anything. Thank you.